Okay, so we're going to start right now. In the site plan file, this is the site plan floor plan. So we can see kind of the map of our site plan. We're going to switch over to the 3D view so you can see what our 3D topography looks like. And before I do anything, I want you to note that when I switch to the 3D view, I'm getting kind of a zoomed out 3D view, and it looks a little weird. That's because when this file was made, some of the components were put at the wrong level. Can you see them? Can you see the components that are put at the wrong level there? All right, so you see the ones that are put at the wrong level down here? They're at 0, where all of our topography is put at actual height above sea level. So we're going to zoom in on those so we can fix them first. We've got grating, a manhole cover, and a fire hydrant. They're all on level 1. Let's see where they should be. Let's zoom out. I'm going to see where my holes are so I know what level things should be at. Let's take a look at this manhole cover and see what it says. It has a host of sub-region. Still level 1 offset 0. You may have to just delete those files. I think that they're just bugged files. Let's take a look at them. If I zoom in on them down here. Yeah, see the host is messed up. Host means it's been placed on a spot. So all of your components that you place, whether it's components in your house like a sofa or TV or a light, or site components like we're going to talk about today. Site components include trees, bushes, also things like fire hydrants, manhole covers, that kind of stuff, have to have a host. That's a surface that they're placed on. So these were placed, but they were, when the person was clicking, they clicked off in the wrong spot. Instead of clicking it on the sub-region, which is the road, they clicked into space. They ended up on level 1. So there's no way to really fix these at this point. So we're just going to click on them, and we're going to delete them, because if they remain, they will mess up our view to the end of time. So now if I click, you'll know I get a good zoom where my 3D view fills my screen. Now, I also want you to note that when we're in 3D view, you can see the view cube has north, south, east, and west. This is very convenient, so I can orient myself. If I click on my top down, I can click and orient myself so north is up. And now I'll know, even though the labels aren't here, this top street that goes horizontal is Maple Avenue, and the vertical one is my 10th Street. So I can kind of see where roughly my house might be on this view. I come down to 3D here, I can see my topography, and it is a pretty gentle curve. Does this kind of match with what you all said was going to happen to the water when it runs off your houses and that kind of stuff? You feel pretty comfortable with this 3D view? All right. If you feel that this needs to be changed, for example, you really need to put your house somewhere where the water is going to go, that kind of a thing, or if you want to make a berm, let's do a berm. Let's say you want to make a berm across the whole front level of the house to block off sound in the front of the house so it's a little bit quieter. Let's see how we could do that. We're going to modify the topography. So I'm going to come back to more of a three-dimensional view here. Let's put north more to the top so I know where I'm working. I'm going to select my topography. Okay. And I want to edit that surface. So not editing the surface. Now your tools will be visible because your screen's not as zoomed in as mine is. You'll see these tools automatically. My tools, I have to kind of click on a button to show them. I have the tool for place a point. All of our topography is made by clicking on points and telling the computer at what elevation that specific point is. And then the computer decides how does it get from that point to the other points that exist. In order to create a surface, we need a minimum of 3 points. It'll create the surface that those 3 points create, if that makes sense. Let's look at our other points first and see what height we have. If we go out to the edge here, up at the north, you'll note that we're not at absolute elevation. We're at, we are at absolute elevation, not relative elevation. Absolute elevation is an exact number above sea level. So that's why we're at 771 feet, 3 and 123 256 inches. The exact height of that spot in real life. So any points I want to put, I'd have to put relative to that. So I'm going to put a line of points across my front yard here relative to that point. Do I have any other points within my topography here? Or are they all around the edges? I think all of my points are around the edges. So if they're all 700 feet, that's 772, 771, 771, 770. How high do you think my berm should be? A berm is just a raised mound of dirt. I think it should be up to roughly your knees. Maybe a little higher. Does 2 feet sound good? So if the highest point of my front yard over here is 772 feet, and over here it's 771 or 770 feet, our yard slopes from the front to the back, right? You guys determined that. So it's likely that my front yard here, within my boundaries, is a little lower than what it is along this line of points, right? Can we assume that? Probably around 769, somewhere in there, right? So I want to kind of guess what my points should be. I can always change them later. So let's go ahead and, where's my points at? Manage, modify, there we are. Place a point. I have to give it an elevation. You'll note absolute elevation. I'm going to go 772 feet. We'll see how that works. And I'm going to go top down so I know I'm putting it exactly where I want it. I'm going to plop it right about there. I'll put another one there, 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 and there. Now let's see if that had the effect that I was going for. Not really, huh? If anything, it actually screwed up my sidewalk. You see that? So I need to tell it that the area right around my berm should remain. And then this line of points needs to be at a certain height. Does that make sense? So let's do that. Let's find out where that should be. So let's say I'm on my north here. Let's make a line of points and let's call them 769. Again, estimating here. And I'm going to go a line of points right around my berm. Roughly, like that. What I've ended up with is a series of little hills. Do you see that? Can you see the series of little hills that I have? Yeah. But I've put my sidewalk back where it belongs, which is good. So that's a start. So now I just need more 772 points. That's easy enough. 772, and come along here and go in between. And you know the topography lines that kind of interconnect, showing me where things are. And now I have a nice berm in my front yard.
Any ways to get the kind of they go?
Say that a different way?
The berm, it still shows like the tips of. Any ways to get that?
I'm not sure what you need to get rid of that. A point's a point.
Like the of the.
To make the points disappear?
Like one like more of an angle. Yeah. Are those tops?
You want the little dots to go away.
Are those the points that are like the elevation points, or is that the?
Let's find out. Let me zoom out here a little bit so we can see a little better. No, I think the mound's fine.
Okay.
Those are just the points, so you can see the dots. You have to finish.
The actual like point.
You got to finish the surface to see what it looks like, and you can always go back in and edit it later. So that's our That's editing. Now, I find it's very hard to work on the surface when it's colored this color. This dark green is hard to see. I often like to change my surface to a different material to work on it, and then change it back to grass later. So to change my surface material, if you select it, you'll notice material site grass is my material. I can change that right in my properties browser to anything else I want. I like to use the site materials because they're designed for it, but site sand is typically a better one. Let's try site sand and see. You see, we can just see a little better when it's not so dark, right? I'll make my surface sand often, work on it, and then change it back to grass when I'm done. It's just a visual cue for me. It makes it a little easier to work on, if that makes sense. Okay? You'll see, I'm gonna probably leave this sand for now. Next thing I want to do is plop in a building pad. I need to know roughly where the building pad is going to go. And I can always do some measurements then as well. So to put a building pad in, I want to go to massing and site. Massing and site is where all of my site components go. Anything I'm going to put on my site view that's not inside my house. If it's outside the walls of my house, it's on the massing and site tab. And what I want is a building pad. Other things you're going to see here, topo surface allows you to add new surface as opposed to editing a surface. Site components where you're going to add in your trees and your parking component, your fire hydrants and your grates, that kind of thing. Parking components we'll get to in our next unit. And over here, modify site, we're going to work on things like split surfaces and subregions in a little bit. So building pad, let's select building pad. We want to give it a height offset, and we got to think, what height should it be? Well, we are. So this should be at the bottom of your house, the very bottom level of your house. So we need to think about where the topography is, where you want to put it. We can kind of force that a little bit. So let's back out of this actually for a second and go back into edit my surface. Think about where we want to put it, roughly here-ish, and think about roughly where my topography probably is. I can actually get, because typically what you do if you're building a house is you get equipment out there and you grade the surface. You flatten out that spot where you put in the house. My in-laws recently had this problem. They wanted to build a house next summer. They want to put a house on land they own. They're very excited. They had the house all designed. Everything was ready to go. They got the architects out to look at the site, and they were told, you can't put a house here. It cost too much money to grade the site, flatten the spot out. The house would end up being 8 foot above the ground if we didn't spend the money to grade the site properly. It was too much of a hill. Flatten out the spot where you want to put the house would take too much. Typically, you get equipment out and you flatten out the spot first. So let's get our equipment out and flatten out the spot. I'm going to put my house roughly here-ish. So I have to kind of guess. Well, if I know that the bottom of my property is 768, and up here is 769, I'm going to say, let's make it 769-ish, roughly right here in the middle. To do that, I want to get a point. I'm going to make my point 769. And I'm going to put 4 of them in an area that I know is going to be bigger than my house is, roughly. Roughly, there. Good. So now I have a nice flat spot to work with. Now I can come back to my building pad. So I know that my base elevation of my ground is 769 feet. That's the same as the 0 elevation on your house. Does that make sense? Those two things coincide. So how far down below that 0 elevation is the bottom of your house? You've got a crawl space. You have basement or crawl space? Crawl space. So both crawl spaces. So it's 4 foot below 769. 765. So height offset above level 1, 765. How do I want to make it? My draw panel is up here. I draw it the same way I draw anything else. So I don't have any walls to pick to make it. So I can't pick walls. This is assuming that your house has already been put in here. We're doing it the other way around. we're going to do a rectangle. And I'm going to click. And I'm going to type. Okay, I can't type yet. Let's click first, and then we'll change dimensions. So what's the depth of your house, Anna? The depth. There's no height. Depth this way. Roughly. Okay, so 32. And the width. Hey, I was pretty close. Look at that. There's my building pad. I can annotate aligned. Actually, I can't. Okay. I thought I could annotate to annotate. So I'd have to make these lines. I can make lines in here if I really want to. Detail lines. No, I can't make detail lines either. Okay. So you have to estimate where you want your building pad to go. We can always move it afterwards. So let's put it in for now. And move it that afterwards. So put it in and see what it looks like. Should be roughly 4 foot below my surface. And you see what it did? It creates a nice, clean, sharp space. Nice, clean, sharp space. Cuts through the ground right at that spot. Gives me a nice flat spot to put my house on. You have to have one of these. You try to put your house on without this, it makes the whole process really complicated, because what happens is you get dirt in your basement. It would depend. So you do 769 for your flat space. That's 4 feet below that, right? If you don't do a building pad and you just stick your house on this space, what you get is dirt filling the basement, because the zero level of your house goes wherever you put the house, and then the basement extends below that, right? Well, on the site plan, below the base level is automatically filled with dirt. That's how a site works. Does that make sense? And digging that out in Revit is very complicated after the house gets put in. You gotta have one of these building pads. It makes that very nice, sharp, clean, just spot to put a house. Gotta have one. Easiest way to do it, right here like this. Now, I can come back up to my top view. I can select it. Select my building pad. I can move it. Oh no, I guess I have to get offset to select it. There, now I selected it. Now I can do top down. I can move it after it's created pretty easily. I can also change its height offset after it's created if I want to. Questions about making a building pad? Okay, the thing a building pad also lets you do is, as you're working on the site, before we put your house in, it lets you see where the house is going to be. So we can add in your sidewalks, your driveways, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to assume that my garage is going to be here in the south side of the house, and I'm going to make a driveway going off to the east alleyway. That's how I'm going to do it. And we're going to talk now about split surfaces versus subregions. 2 ways to make a new type of surface. So right now, our topo surface here is all sand. It's going to be grass, right? To make a section of it be a different material, like Adam for your driveway, you have to do something to get a different section of it. If I do a split surface, I take my surface I already have and I split it to make a new surface. So I'm going to carve out a section of it in the shape of a driveway and make that a new surface. If I do that, what I'm doing is making 2 surfaces that are independent of each other. Meaning if I change the topography on the sand grass surface, it has no impact or effect on the new surface of the driveway. And same vice versa, they don't affect each other. Because you noticed when I put those points in, all of the surface around it was affected, right? Well, if I split surfaces, they're not affected, okay? A subregion is the other way. So I can kind of cordon off a section of my region to give a different material too, specifically for that purpose. It's just the subregion is just for that purpose. Here's a section of my topography. That's a different material than the rest of my topography, but it's still part of the topography. So when I change topography or if I do different work to it, it affects that. Which do you think we want for a driveway? Not typically, because your driveway typically follows your topography. Doesn't it typically? Unless you specifically don't want that. So which will we use for a parking lot, do you think? A split. Typically your parking lots are flat and carved out of your space around you and separate from the topography around an area, right? You see how that's different than a typical driveway? Okay. So you pick the one that makes sense for what you're doing at the time. So I'm going to show you both, but then I'm going to switch to subregions. So let's go ahead and do split surface. I'm going to select my surface. I'm not massing a site. Split surface. Pick the surface, and now I get to draw this split surface. So I'm going to come in here. I have all my tools, like arc and lines, rectangles. This is a spline. If you remember from Inventor, a spline is a curvy line. If you really want to do an interesting driveway, you can do a curvy line. All these things. So I'm going to do a center point arc. Picking this as my center point. And I'm going to go from here to there with that arc. Also as my center point. I'm going to do, let's see. Yeah, let's do a 19-inch driveway, a 19-foot driveway. Yeah, let's do 20. But by using the center point arc, I make sure the two arcs are concentric and they kind of follow each other. And then I can get my lines here. Take this out to that region there. And bring it down. And I'm actually going to give myself a little parking pad off to the side here. So we're going to go like 33 feet this way. I'm going to come in like that. And like that. And so there's my driveway. Parking region, driveway, come in, garage. Oh, I still have to finish off the driveway up here too. Has to be a fully enclosed region. It's going to yell at me because I have this little. Do I do it or do I not? Oh no, I don't. Okay. See, sometimes it looks like it overlaps, sometimes it doesn't. I don't think it does though. I think it's just a graphical glitch. Let's see what happens. Boom. Driveway. I can now select it. I can give it a new material. Let's do site asphalt. And there it is. There's my driveway. It's a graphical error. This computer does not have a good graphics processor for this sort of thing, and it gets kind of grumpy sometimes. It's just a graphical error. It's okay, I promise. So now we're going to do undo, 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 and X out of that. Discard surface. Now, a subregion. Top down. Same process, same drawing tools. Let's get a little more creative. Let's go out this way. I like me a big driveway. Go like 42 feet. There, something like that's good. And then we come over this way. Roughly there. And I want this one here. And down. There. Did I connect them? Yep. Good. Now that's a driveway. Finish. Select my surface, material, asphalt. See, now it's not doing it. It was just a graphical error. And there's my driveway. Same process for sidewalks or any other surface level stuff you want to do. If you want to make a little section for flower beds, okay, this is carved out of your grass, but it's actually dirt. So like right around the house, you have a section that's dirt instead of grass. And maybe around some of your trees, you have areas that's dirt or mulch or something. And if you have trees like that, there's like a ring around them that's mulch or dirt. Same process. You can use either one, split surface or sub-region, whichever one you think works better for the task at hand. Questions about changing topography, putting in building pads, split surfaces, or sub-regions? Last part we're going to talk about is site components. Site components are any things that get plopped on the site. This is any plants, any stuff like your fire hydrants, that kind of a thing. It's what follows the same process any other component follows. You click on the button for a component in a house, window, door, any of that kind of stuff. You click on the button for a component, and then you immediately click on Load Family to load in a thing that you want. And you're going to get this folder here. This is a complicated folder to go through. Nothing that you want is ever where you think it should be, except site stuff. All in site. You got accessories, dumpsters, building signs, flagpoles, park benches, planters, trash cans. We have parking components, all kinds of stuff there. We have utilities, cable connections, catch basins, fiber optics, fire hydrants, gas connections, utility poles, water connections, blah, blah, blah. Mr. King, where are my plants at? Let's take a look through our folders here. What do you think we got? Doors, ductwork, electrical, entourage. We'll talk about entourage in a second. Furniture, lighting, mass. Mass first. Actually, there's lots of interesting things too, by the way. These are all like big chunky things if you need like a big chunky thing. Planting, there you are. So there's not many here, but keep in mind any of these files is actually many files all in one. I'll show you that here. So tropical plants, shrubs, conifers, those are the ones that don't lose their leaves. Deciduous do lose their leaves. Fall trees, they look like fall trees, and tropical trees. What's that? It's not about drawing the trees. These aren't drawn trees. These are the shaded versions that we use when we're in shaded view, specifically to save on processing power. You're going to get, pick which one you like the best, which one do you think looks the crappiest? Deciduous. Let's pick a fall one so we can see what pretty fall trees look like. It's going to get better. So as soon as you pick it, it loads over here. Note when I just click this drop down, I get tons of trees. So each of these is in that file. I can pick any one of these I get, and the feet next to it is how tall it is. So pick one. Which one do you think looks the best? Or which one do you think will look the nicest? Pop a red oak in here. It's just a placeholder in shaded mode. Wait till we get the realistic mode, and you're going to like it. All right, pick another one. We're going to put 2 trees in here. Okay. Now I'm going to get my ground back to grass. I'm going to get rid of this. Get rid of that just so we have a better view here. I switch to realistic mode first. There's your realistic mode. And how about we do a quick render so you can see what our site looks like. View. Render. Well, let's do a quick medium screen size render. Exterior sun only. Go. You don't have a choice. Hope you saved your work. Checks out. All right, so this is a quick little render. You get to see some shadows. The neat thing with this is you get to see shadows. You really end up with extra time if you're really blowing through this project quickly and you have extra time. You can play with angle of sun. You can pick the time of year for your render, time of day and time of year for your render, so you can see what kind of shadows you get. That's how we did some of those pictures in the PowerPoint presentation. Pick time of year, time of day, and you can see how the shadows fall with the trees you've picked on your house. Here we go. Here's your render. What do you think? Ready? So there we are. That's how we do all of those things. If you have any questions as you work, please ask.